The hidden cost of trying to be perfect. There is a room so clean it has no air. The walls glow with the color of milk. The glass shines with a surgeon's hunger, and on the table lies a life ironed flat, without crease or memory. You think this is safety. You think this is respect. But if you press your ear against the spotless surface, you hear an animal scratching from beneath. It is the sound of everything you hid to keep the room clean. Perfection is never just about excellence. It is a story about survival told in the grammar of control. Somewhere, a child learned that mistakes were not weather, they were indictments. Somewhere, a raised eyebrow from a tired father or a sigh from a distracted mother carved a law. Only the straight line is loved. The child began to monitor every gesture. Do not spill. Do not speak out of turn. Do not bring home a grade that shakes the furniture. Do not offer a drawing unless the house you drew has the right number of windows. That child grows into someone whose face other people compliment. A tidy apartment. An enviable CV. A calm insistence that, I'm fine, even when the body keeps tapping Morse code across the ribs. On bad days, the code says panic. On good days, it says not yet. Perfection wears politeness like armor. It wins applause while it hemorrhages attention. It makes a reliquary of your time and places your soul inside it for safekeeping, then forgets where the key is. The hidden cost begins where the applause ends. The secret tax collector knocks after midnight. Sleep lays down its tools and refuses to work for you anymore. Curiosity, the little light that once wandered the house freely, refuses to leave the attic. Tenderness looks at the daily schedule and decides to go live under a bridge. You become efficient at everything except feeling, and then you call that numbness maturity. History loves a polished mask. It names entire centuries after its surfaces. Victorian virtue was a corset that held the body upright while it cut off air. Puritan piety washed hands so thoroughly the skin cracked and bled, then called the blood a sign of grace. The industrial clock put numbers on time and then forgot that days have weather. The measuring of things made railroads meet at the same hour, and also made souls believe they had to keep pace with machines. Perfection is a cultural export. From the factory floor to the family dinner, from the ledger to the body, we learned to iron wrinkles from linen, and then began ironing them from our faces. If your biography is different, if no parent threatened, if no teacher humiliated, perfection still arrives wearing the mask of progress. Schools teach grades as if they were mirrors. Offices promote the untiring as if fatigue or treason. Phones turn lives into magazines with infinite issues, each one featuring you with slightly whiter teeth. You look at your day and see room for improvement, like a plainsman looks at acres and sees harvests he will never live to reap. Perfection is a god that eats offerings and never says thank you. The danger is not that you will fail to impress this god. The danger is that you will succeed, and in the succeeding, you will notice your hands do not feel like hands anymore. They feel like tools that someone rented. You go home, but your home feels like a showroom where you are the most fragile object. You try to relax and discover you do not remember how. The voice that narrates your life has acquired the tone of a foreman with a clipboard. It counts how many times you smile without ruffling anything. It keeps a ledger of apologies owed when you are not perfect enough in your kindness. Perfection hides its cruelty by calling it discipline. But discipline loves reality. Discipline permits fatigue, schedules rest, and respects error as information. Perfection hates reality because reality includes blemish and surprise. Perfection prefers rehearsals to performances, drafts to books, plans to people. It would rather polish the key than open the door. When perfection meets love, it instructs love in the right posture. It gives love flashcards and tells it when to speak. It tells grief to wait in the car because photos are being taken. The mind that chases perfect lives in binary. It invents a world with two colors, flawless or worthless. If the dinner did not dazzle, it was a disaster. If the essay had a typo, it is trash. Burn it. If your child cried in the supermarket, you were exposed as a fraud. There is no room for the almost, the strange, the learning curve. There is no room for grace. Perfection is not excellence. It is violence with good manners. And yet it often begins with love, or something that wants to be love. You want to protect others from your rough edges. You want to keep chaos away from the people you promised to shield. You want to earn a place in a world that insists on terms. You want to make sure no one has to carry your weight. So you become weightless, and then you discover that to be carried by no one is a loneliness that pulls the skin tight over bone. It is not only personal. Cultures adopt perfection, the way empires adopt marble cold, gleaming, permanent until it cracks. Cleanliness laws multiply. The poor become a stain to be washed away, a sick an embarrassment to be privatized. Bodies are sorted into righteous and unfit. The myth of the spotless city writes utopian manifestos and ends with gates. Perfection is the politics of fear, wearing white gloves. It moves through history like a hand slipping into a noose and calling it a necklace. If you want to hear perfection's favorite word, listen for should. It is a whip made of syllables. You should know this already. You should be over that by now. You should be grateful without complaint. You should look like you never lived a day outdoors. You should forgive everyone except yourself. Should rides your shoulders until you stoop, and then informs you that the bending means you are weak. You answer by trying harder. Perfection loves that answer. It sells you another mirror. Maybe you are thinking, all this drama for a bit of polish? Maybe you have built something beautiful by caring fiercely about detail, and the critique of perfection feels like a cheap shot from the lazy. Spend an hour with a dancer's feet after the show. Sit with a surgeon's tremor at 2 a.m. after the procedure that took longer than the schedule allowed. Read the email a graduate student writes their advisor at 3a.m., deleting sentences that reveal fear and replacing them with words like progress and insight. Listen to the laughter in the conference room that is half oxygen and half warning. Excellence costs, but perfection charges interest. Some nights, when the calendar rests, you can hear a second story under the story. It says this: you were never built for sterile rooms. Your life was designed for weather. Wind teaches trees to be strong by bending them. Rivers learn their shape by colliding with rocks. The face you were born with knows how to crease when something matters. If you iron the curve from your days, you flatten the very thing that makes them worth inhabiting. The hidden cost of trying to be perfect is that you pay with the currency you cannot mint again. Attention, tenderness, risk, pain that earns wisdom, time that belongs to no one. You are not a porcelain figure meant for a shelf. You are clay that stays wet while you are alive. Clay is messy. It yields. It records the fingerprints of everyone you dared to love. The vessels that hold water in old houses are not flawless. They are repaired with gold after they crack, lines of light brightening the fracture. In one culture, they call it kintsugi. In another, they call it living. What you call it depends on how much you are willing to pay to keep the room clean. The suspense does not come from villains in capes. It comes from calendars and committees, and the algorithms that learn which version of your face gets more hearts. The tension is quiet, like the hum of a new refrigerator. A near imperceptible pressure to arrange everything in straight lines. The conflict lives inside your ribcage, between the creature that wants to run in mud and the citizen who knows the rules of the carpeted hallway. Perfection recruits allies that sound noble. Efficiency, professionalism, standards. Each is a fine word, necessary in its place. But in the hands of perfection, they become weapons with blunt elegance. A teacher sets a rubric so clear that a student who is not an instrument breaks their own song trying to fit. A manager writes performance metrics that favor the appearance of energy over the work it takes to recover from failure. A hospital imports the logic of assembly lines into rooms where bodies arrive with histories that refuse to be scanned. The forms get filled. The care goes missing. Unknown forces reward the performance. The meeting nods at the colleague who speaks in airless paragraphs without verbs. The board prefers grass to the story of the nurse who stayed late with a patient who would not stop shaking. The applause meter turns up for polish and down for honesty. Slow, over years, an institution becomes a theater where the play called Flawless runs forever to an exhausted audience that claps because what else is there to do? Inside the individual, the suspense takes the form of an inner trial. The prosecutor is tireless. Evidence is drawn from last Tuesday and from your childhood, from a bad photo and from the last time you forgot someone's name. The judge is never your ally, even when the case is dismissed for lack of being perfect enough. Your victories are narrow escapes that teach you nothing except to tighten security next time. You call this your standards. It is not a standard. It is a siege. Perfection is not courageous. It is strategic. It avoids situations where it cannot control the narrative. That is why procrastination is not laziness. It is camouflage. If the painting is never started, it can never be criticized. If the relationship is never fully entered, it cannot be left. If the book lives forever as notes, it cannot fail. Delaying becomes a temporary relief disguised as wisdom. The temporary lasts 20 years. The body follows orders it did not vote for. Perfection trains the nervous system to anticipate humiliation at the smallest irregularity. A typo is a small explosion of cortisol. A late reply is proof of your unworthiness. A request for clarification feels like an ambush. This is not melodrama. This is a nervous system trained in a laboratory where mercy was for others. The mind becomes a watchdog, the body a leash, the days, hours a field where you walk in circles to prove you are housebroken. Meet the surgeon who can thread a suture in a storm, but cannot say, "I need help," without a tremor that feels like death. He goes home to a clean kitchen and cannot eat. Somewhere a ballerina's toenail tears off inside her shoe, and the audience weeps at her grace. In a quiet apartment, a coder refactors the same function 6 times because the existence of an inelegant solution disturbs him like a moral failing. An architect erases a human from a drawing because figures introduce life, and life introduces proportion she cannot control. They are not villains. They are citizens of a city with invisible laws. Social media spreads this city across the map. The timeline is an art gallery where the only medium is completion. The algorithm cherishes faces that never flinch in days that never happen twice. It cannot metabolize process. It does not reward experiments where you fall. It hands you a template for being and invites you to pour yourself into it. Eventually, the template demands a sacrifice. Surprise. A life without surprise is a museum exhibit attended by a guard who is also you. Perfection also has a love language. Apology for existing. You say sorry for taking a second to think. You say sorry because your coffee cup clinks too loudly against the saucer. You apologize for your own idea before you even speak it. You make a joke about your lack of expertise while you have more experience than anyone in the room. It is not humility. It is preemptive self-erasure to avoid the possibility that someone will do it for you later. You call it polite. It is a quiet funeral for your voice. In the suspense of daily life, there are systems that collude. The educational machine trains for the test and leaves the mind to starve. The work machine trains for the metric and leaves the craft to rot. The cultural weather trains for the photograph and leaves memory to blur into slogans. Meanwhile, the inner jury grows addicted to a drug it makes itself. The short-lived relief of being told you did not fail today. The withdrawal is brutal, so you dose yourself again. Some perfectionists become tyrants because they are tired of being tyrannized. They export their standards to others, like a country exports steel. A parent who grew up with a merciless voice becomes a merciless tutor in their own home. A boss who cannot stand his flaws creates a ritual where the team must gather weekly to confess theirs. A partner who fears rejection turns their love into a contest that no one can win. This is not an excuse. It is a crime scene. The weapon is inheritance. On the edge of this cliff stands a paradox. The more you demand flawlessness, the more you create the conditions for error. The surgeon's hands shake on the most ordinary day because the thought of not being immaculate has become more dangerous than the tumor. The dancer falls not because she is clumsy, but because her body cannot remember how to recover from anything but perfection. The coder ships nothing and cannot be wrong. The architect builds a building that looks like a diagram of a building. Perfection produces sterile failure where a living mistake might have taught. This is suspense, because a life cannot remain in this state without breaking. Something gives. A small betrayal to self becomes a large betrayal to a friend. The throat that swallowed every cry swallows a scream that turns into a disease. The lie you told to keep the room tidy calls its relatives, and they arrive with luggage. The cost is cumulative. It compounds like interest. By the time you recognize the shape of the debt, you are standing in a house you built without windows, and the air inside is getting thin. There is a way down from this house, but it does not include a helicopter. It includes stairs that creak. It involves removing one brick at a time and discovering that the wall you feared was load-bearing is a facade. You do not have to renounce your craft, your care, your hunger for the particular. You do have to fire a manager you hired long ago, whose only qualification was that they never slept. After all, there is a difference between a standard and a sentence. Which brings us to a deeper revelation that does not flatter our pride. What we call perfection is often not love of excellence. It is fear of shame organized into a daily routine. The next part is a map out of that routine, but it will not praise us. It will ask us to admit the kink in the story. That fear, not devotion, has been driving the car while we claimed we were merely precise. The perspective shift does not arrive as a lecture. It comes like rain in a city that has forgotten it is built near a river. You notice that the storm drains gurgle with relief. Perfection is not a synonym for excellence. It is the purity cult that colonized your excellence and made it sterile. It keeps a temple in your mind with a priest whose sermons are always about cleanliness. He uses words like integrity to describe a life that never stains. He is lying. Historically, purity codes are not about health. They are about control. They tell you what to eat, when to wash, whom to touch, how to worship, where to stand, and what is allowed to be said in what voice. They protect order by turning human mess into accusation. In the 19th century, cleanliness took on the force of a creed. Soap advertisements produced moral fables. The industrial factory demanded standardization, and then sold it back to the home as virtue. You could launder your shirt and your shame in the same basin. The price of admission was silence. Mass movements borrow this logic. Utopias drafted by perfecters end as prisons. You can trace a line from flawless ideals to barbed wire without lifting your pen. Eugenics begins as a science of improvement and ends in ovens. Moral panics begin as attempts to shield the young and end with books burning in neat piles. Wherever perfection turns to policy, the cracks fill with embers. The hidden cost at scale is cruelty with paperwork. At the domestic scale, the cost is intimacy. Perfection cannot be seen. It must be performed. To keep your performance immaculate, you hide your grief and your needs. Your friendships become status reports. Your marriage becomes a truce built on omission. You approach your children with the bright, beaming face of a profession that refuses to retire at home. They learn that love feels like a quarterly evaluation. They learn to fake sleep when you approach with good intentions. The untidy parts of family life go into the junk drawer and breed. Here is the uncomfortable math. Everything you are proud of came from error. Your mother tongue was a series of mistakes with feedback. Your expertise lives on a hill of failed attempts, filed under try again. The musician you adore miscounted, missed notes, and learned to make the stumble into swing. The scientist who changed your medicine ruined 100 Petri dishes. If you erase the right to be wrong, you delete the laboratory where you grow into your life. Neuroscience has a dispassionate way of describing this. Learning requires prediction and error. A brain refines its model of the world by making bets and noticing when it loses. The signal that says wrong is the very signal that deepens knowledge. If you punish that signal with shame, you stop the process. You become an expert at remembering how to feel small. You mistake the sensation of superiority after a perfect performance for understanding. The understanding lives elsewhere, in a room where people laugh at their errors kindly and try again. In craft, there is a phrase, the good enough hand. Not the careless hand. The hand that knows when to stop tinkering, because life is finite. Donald Winnicott, a pediatrician who watched parents try to be flawless, blessed the world with the idea of the good enough mother, the parent who fails in small ways, reliably, and who repairs, teaching the child not that the world is perfect, but that it is survivable. The phrase could seed an entire civilization. The good enough partner, the good enough leader, the good enough self. Not resignation, reality. The revelation is not an invitation to mediocrity. It is an indictment of cowardice dressed as high standards. Perfectionism in its maladaptive form is avoidance. Avoidance of humiliation, of judgment, of the practice of standing in a room with the sound of your own attempt in your ears. The alternative is not sloppiness. It is courage in small increments. It is writing ugly first drafts and letting them stink up your desk. It is showing a sketch to a friend who knows how to speak without a scalpel. It is going to the meeting and saying, I don't know yet, but here is what I am trying. And also, here is where I keep getting lost. The hidden cost is opportunity, measured in the lives you do not live, because the first one must remain unblemished. You say no to invitations that might make you appear inexperienced. You say no to love that does not meet a checklist. You say no to careers that require apprenticeship. You lock yourself in a competence you have outgrown, because the next one begins with being a beginner. The room with trophies becomes a prison with velvet walls. The door is unlocked. The price of leaving is a look on your own face you have been avoiding for years. If you want a historical mirror, kinder than the gulag, think of the workshop. Medieval guilds kept standards that prevented collapse. A bridge built by proud incompetence is a grave. But the workshop also had a littered floor. Apprentices broke things. Masters cursed and then taught. The cathedral lifted stone by stone, and each stone bore the handprints of someone who would never see the spire completed. The Gothic arch that lifts your eyes from the pew was drawn by someone who smudged the page a dozen times. The sanctity did not come from spotless plans. It came from a community that understood the value of repair. A philosophy of imperfection exists in plain sight in art forms that refuse to wash their history. Jazz bends notes that academic ears once called dirty. Pottery in certain traditions favors the asymmetrical, the glaze that runs, the fingerprint left on a rim. Languages absorb errors until they become idioms. You are speaking someone's mistake every day without knowing. The world is a museum of elegant remnants from people who dared to be wrong in public. Accepting this is not easy because it means taking your shame out of storage. Shame thrives on darkness. It dies in air. The perfectionist's project is to avoid humiliation in front of an invisible jury. The liberation is to discover that the jury is a fiction curated by fear. There are critics and there are consequences. But most people are too busy surviving their own inner trials to attend yours. The ones who are free enough to notice you are usually the ones who forgive. When they criticize, it is in the language of repair. Perfection has one more trick. It pretends to be moral. It tells you that cleanliness itself is kindness to others. It tells you that if you are hard enough on yourself, no one will have to be burdened by your fallibility. This is false charity. When you are merciless with your own errors, you become merciless with others. When you refuse your own mess, your compassion is a thin blanket on a cold night. You'll pull it tight over your own shoulders the first time the wind rises. The hidden cost is not only your capacity to create, it is your capacity to love. There is a place you can stand where this becomes visible. It is a shop window at dusk. On the glass, the reflections of the street and the objects inside merge. You see yourself and what you want at once. That is where you must choose. Keep polishing the reflection until the night erases the world beyond the glass, or walk inside and touch the thing. Your fingerprints will show. They are proof that you are not afraid to enter. The emotional gravity arrives when the ledger of costs adds up to a single line item with no number. The life you did not live. There are people you did not meet because your face was a mask. There are rooms you did not enter because your shoes were dusty and you assumed there would be a dress code. There are words you did not say because they were not the best words you could imagine. There are mornings you did not see because you were editing the previous night. Perfection makes intimacy impossible because intimacy is the practice of being seen in motion. If you cannot be in motion without rehearsing every step, then the person who holds you is dancing with a statue. They will grow lonely in your arms. They will begin to edit themselves to match your edited self. The house will be quiet and shiny, a museum with a mortgage. Children of perfectionists become archaeologists. They dig for the mother's sadness behind the gleam of the kitchen. They map the father's rage as a constellation of small, controlled corrections. They learn that love is a series of small criticisms arranged like pearls, exquisite and choking. The hidden cost passes down like the worst heirloom, a mirror that shows whoever looks into it in the best possible light, which is to say, in a light that burns the skin. The body records this theology. Insomnia is a church, where the liturgy is a rehearsal for a tomorrow that never arrives. Your jaw is a vice furnished by your anxious jaw and decorated by your dentist. The stomach becomes a weather station with only one forecast: storm. Skin holds a referendum on your life in the language of hives. The back becomes a filing cabinet where stress stores folders labeled later. Tension is a tax. It charges interest. The bill is franked with your name. Work collapses under the weight of unrelenting performance. A nurse leaves the profession, not because she cannot handle blood, but because she cannot handle a system that punishes pauses. A writer stops writing not for lack of stories, but for lack of a permission slip from a voice that will never sign. An engineer burns out because he is never allowed to ship something with a scene. A chef begins to hate garlic. The hidden cost is the loss of joy in your competence, the conversion of craft into a crucible you never leave. There is a sadness particular to successful perfectionists. It is the sadness of standing in a room full of evidence that you exist, frames, medals, polite letters, and feeling like a ghost has sublet your body. They are praised for results and unrecognizable to themselves. Their life becomes a stunt they cannot confess to finding boring. So they improvise risks that endanger more than pride. The affair, the scandal, the sabotage. Not acts of lust or malice, but arson to feel heat. You can mark the moment when a person chooses not to pay this cost any longer. They begin to tell the truth faster. They rehearse less. They use smaller words. They stand up in a meeting and say, "I don't know," with their shoulders relaxed. In the presence of the inner jury, this is a misdemeanor, punished as treason. But the sentence is lighter than the old life. They begin to laugh, but not at themselves with ashen irony. They laugh like people who remember the punchline is that everyone stumbles. There are forms for this elsewhere on earth. In Japan, a cracked bowl is repaired with gold to honor the damage. In the desert, a weaver leaves a deliberate imperfection in a rug to let the spirit pass through. In monasteries, scribes drew little fools in the margins, a reminder that sacred texts were copied by human hands that itch. In blues and gospel, the voice breaks and tells the truth. A philosophy worthy of your life would make a place for these breaks and call them teachers. To enter that philosophy, you will have to face the tyrant that perfection hired, the inner critic who does not sleep. Do not try to kill it. It learned its methods while trying to keep you alive. Thank it. Put it on a shorter leash. Assign it a better job. Proofreader after the first draft. Editor after the jam session. Tester after the prototype. Demand that it stop attending first dates and funerals. It will snarl. It can learn. You will have to practice failing in small, safe ways to recalibrate a nervous system that confuses error with exile. Leave a typo in a text on purpose and see whether your friends leave you. Try a new recipe without 3 days of research. Wear the shirt you like that one person told you was too loud. If your heart speeds, treat it as training, not a signal to retreat. The heartbeat slows when the body discovers that the world did not end. Over time, the world will feel larger than your fear. Grace for others returns when grace for yourself re-enters through the tiniest crack. A colleague who missed a detail is not a saboteur. They are a mammal with a crowded brain. The child who knocked over a glass is not your enemy. They are a person learning gravity. The friend who showed up late is not insulting your timeline. They are wrestling with a rumor that the day never ends. When your shame shrinks in scale, vengeance ceases to feel like a moral duty. You become precise without being cruel. This is not the part where we pretend you can renounce perfection with a vow. Perfection will send flowers to your door with little notes that say, "Remember me?" It will tempt you when you are praised for your control. It will whisper when disaster strikes and the need to build a clean narrative arrives like a job offer. It will tell you that excellence equals armor when actually excellence equals attention. Attention, not to your reflection, but to the thing itself. The patient, the sentence, the person you love, the floor that needs sweeping, the world that resists your templates. You will need rituals that honor this. A morning where you sit without input and ask, what tiny risk will make me more alive today? An evening where you write down one mistake and what it taught you, and then forgive it without speeches. A weekly hour where you make something with your hands you are bad at and refuse to monetize the result. A monthly dinner where everyone brings a dish they cooked for the first time and swears to be kind. A season where you say yes to the unphotographable. If none of this sounds like history, look again. Every golden age of culture is a collaboration between standards and wildness. Athens licensed tragedy because it knew the polis needed a room where mess could be ritual, not scandal. Renaissance workshops balanced patron demands with the apprentice's splatter. Scientific revolutions emerged not from spotless certainty, but from the tolerance for anomalies that embarrassed old theories. The ages that tried to polish themselves into heaven ended as cautionary tales. The world moves forward when someone says, "I might be wrong," and keeps going. You will be tempted to delay until the calendar is clear, the inbox quiet, the body perfect. That day isn't on the calendar. The inbox is a river whose source is not in your house. The body that demands perfection will demand it from you until you die. Start anyway. The crack you dread will be the place your life admits sunlight. The person you are trying to protect will finally step forward and say, "I have been waiting at the door, and I am tired of knocking." Tonight, after you turn off the light and the house makes its small settling noises, you will hear another sound, softer than the hum of the refrigerator, smaller than the click of cooling pipes. It is the sound of your life, tapping. A patient rhythm, like a visitor unwilling to leave, even though you have not invited them in. Do not open your phone to drown it. Let it knock. Ask yourself an impolite question. What did I destroy today to keep the room clean? The answer may be small. It may be that you erased a sentence that misstated the obvious and also contained a small truth. It may be that you saw a look of confusion on someone's face and chose to pretend you understood rather than admit you did not. It may be that you corrected your child when you could have laughed. It may be that you turned away from your own reflection and did not say good morning because you were not camera ready for yourself. Then ask the question that unlocks the door. What would I attempt if I were not required to be flawless, only faithful? Faithful to what? To curiosity. To the craft you love more than your image. To the person at the table with you, whose face relaxes when you stop using them as a mirror. To the body that wants to come home from battle. To the small god of ordinary days, who asks only that you show up with your hands clean enough to hold, not sterile enough to never feel. Tomorrow, choose one visible risk so small it would be embarrassing to tell a friend you need courage for it. Make the first draft. Send the honest apology without a preface. Ask the question in the meeting without a hedge. Wear the shirt. Tell your partner, I was wrong, and stop before them because. Whisper to the inner priest that he can rest. He will stay in the office. He will improve silences into sermons. He will forget to leave the lights on. You will be out in the weather, being alive. As you practice, the invisible jury will grow bored and leave. Your fears will stop dressing in uniforms. The world, without your control, will surprise you with mercy. The thing that went wrong will turn into a story you tell without seeking absolution. The person who sees you stumble will laugh softly and hold out their hand. Excellence will return carrying the toolbox, not a mirror. If there is a shrine worthy of your devotion, it is a worn wooden table with scratches from nights when you told the truth and held hands and spilled. It is the page with coffee stains and a sentence that changed the way you speak to your mother. It is the instrument that buzzes on a note you cannot quite tune until you give up and let your voice break through it. It is the small ceremony of two tired people making dinner and choosing tenderness over being right. It is the old bowl with gold seams that says, I was broken, I am beautiful, I carry water. Somewhere in the archives, there are letters from a century when people believed progress meant bleaching every surface. Some of those letters glow with pride. Others are sticky with grief. You are part of that archive now. The way you live becomes a footnote in a larger story. The time when people began to forgive their hands. When they let error teach again. When they stopped confusing worth with polish. When they realized that the word perfect in the old tongue meant complete, not flawless, and that completion only arrives when you include your bruises. On the day you are asked to speak to someone younger about how you made a life, resist the temptation to make it tidy. Tell them about the nights you did not sleep because a voice kept asking for stricter terms. Tell them about the day you told that voice no. Tell them about the ugly performance that received no applause and gave you back your appetite. Tell them about the friend who stayed when you admitted what you had hidden. Tell them about the room you stopped cleaning so obsessively, and how, when visitors arrived, they sat down and did not want to leave. This is not a revolution that will get a parade. It is a renovation you do with your sleeves rolled. It is a practice of wasting less of your life pleasing an imaginary deity that never once thanked you for your obedience. It is the decision to join the community of the living, where people try and fail and mend and carry water and make jokes about themselves that do not require anyone to bleed. It is the choice to be a person rather than a product. In the dark, touching the edge of the bed, listening to the house, you can promise yourself something without a ceremony. Not, I will never be perfectionist again. The God of perfect love's vows. It feeds on them. Promise something smaller and stranger. I will leave one scene visible tomorrow. I will let one friend see me when I don't have the right words. I will forgive one thing before the day ends. I will choose one task because it matters, not because it will make me look like a statue. The knocking in the walls is not a ghost. It is the life you keep trying to silence because it is louder than your standards. It is demanding and tender. It wants fewer points and more presence. It wants a chair at your table. Pull the chair out, sit, eat, laugh, spill, clean up together, not perfectly, but with affection. Leave a spoon on the counter. Let the sink remember you were human. If this opened your eyes, subscribe to Boring History, because the truth is never boring.